Have you ever really wanted to impress someone? Like it could have been a teacher, maybe a coach, maybe a family member. What kinds of things do you include about yourself to try and impress someone? Or what kind of things do you leave out?
I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. As we have already said, so now I say again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them be under God's curse. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ.
Right after his greeting, Paul moves into rebuking the Galatians. Now, rebuke is a weird word. It's used a lot in the New Testament, but it's not a word that you will come across very often in conversation. In Paul's other letters, he tells the Ephesians that they need to speak the truth in love in order to be more mature. That's the essence of a rebuke, to speak the truth to someone out of your love for them. Here, Paul can see that the Galatians are moving away from the true gospel and they're moving towards a fake gospel. So out of his love for them, Paul says that the Galatians need to wake up to themselves and come back to the true gospel. The churches in Galatia were in trouble. There were people coming to the church and preaching a different gospel. They took the gospel of Jesus and they would twist it, they would warp it. Later in the letter, Paul goes into more detail about what this looks like. But he seems to be pretty serious about it. But I mean, can you blame the Galatians? Preaching alternative gospels is tempting. When the gospel of Jesus says that God himself had to come to earth to die in your place because you mess everything up, you can see why people might not want to hear that. It's much nicer to hear that you can do whatever you want so long as you don't hurt anybody. It's much nicer to hear that if you're a good person, God will be pleased with you. In a weird way, it's also nicer to hear that you can earn your way into heaven. Paul is very clear about fake gospels. He says that if he was still trying to please people, that he wouldn't be a servant of Christ. Now, I think this statement says two things. The most obvious one is that if he was serving people, if he was seeking to please people, then he wouldn't properly be a servant of Christ. The second thing is that if he were trying to please people, he wouldn't actually be a servant of Christ, but he would be a servant of people. I want to leave you with this challenge. When you have the chance to share the gospel, who are you serving? Are you serving Jesus? Are you trying to please him? Or are you serving people? Are you trying to please people? Now, this is a pretty heavy-hitting passage, but I want you to remember what we looked at yesterday. God has given you his grace, and through that, we have peace.